All right, let's get started. Why don't you give me a little rundown of what brings you to this session today?
Sure. I've got two children. Our younger one is very typical for a child. Our older one has been giving of disrespect, a lot of talking back. She is diagnosed with ADHD and OCD, but it is a very regular occurrence to have to repeat myself 15 to 20 times for very basic tasks. And most of the time, by the time she acknowledges me, she's already elevated and angry, and I have a very short temper, and I will also respond with anger. So I'm really just looking to smooth that relationship over and find ways that I can cope and help her actually obey.
Okay, that makes sense. That sounds really difficult. Um, and it sounds like you're actually doing a really great job. The fact that you're here wanting to work on that is pretty huge, and I think that shows how invested you are in y'all's relationship. How do you cope with that? How does that make you feel?
Not well. I don't cope well at all. I mean, a lot of these instances take place in the evening, so I get to spend most of my evening after finally getting her in bed, thinking on my actions, and a lot of time regretting my actions until I fall asleep and wake up and repeat the same thing again. So not very well.
Okay. So, has there been a time when this has been less of a problem for you?
There's kind of another side to this, which is she's very I don't know the right term for it, but she deals very well with like emotional and physical touch, and I am not like that. And so there have been a handful of times where when things start kind of spiraling, I will force myself with great effort to give her a hug or hold her and sit down with her, and that defuses things very quickly. So that can go well, but oftentimes that's a large blocker for me, and so I end up fighting fire with fire because we're both very short tempered, and then things just get out of hand.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds really difficult. Um, what would you say has been the best day at home this week with Charlotte?
Oh man, best day this week. I mean, we had a day where she went to school. There was no issues in the morning. We got to school on time. We got a note from her special ed teacher that she had a really good day, and even shared that story with other peers and stuff. So it was a kind of a big win there. Came home, she immediately, did some chores, cleaned up her room, which again, I had been kind of talking about with her for a couple of days at that point, trying to pave that path, but she ended up doing it without really causing any kind of meltdown. And I don't know if she was just extra tired or what, but bedtime came around and the transition to bedtime was very easy. So that was what I would consider a 10 out of 10 day.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for sharing. That sounds like you're really invested in making sure that y'all's relationship is good and that you're really working on it. And I think that shows. So what are your hopes for today's meeting? What are you hoping to get out of this session together?
I mean, honestly, my hope for this initial meeting is kind of picking an area to focus on. So a lot of my problems in my mind, they're not all rooted in the same thing. A lot of it is her behavior, but there's her behavior and mechanisms that I can use to help her transition or obey or do what's asked. Then backing off of that, there's my own anger with it and how I can cope with that. And then a third thing is my wall or blocker for the physical touch piece, because objectively I know that works well, but I still never go there. So I kind of see three of those different pillars. And I guess for me, I would really like to identify one of those to focus on, because I don't imagine we can knock all three out at the same time.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay. So what I'm hearing is you want to work on your relationship with Charlotte, obviously, but specifically by managing your anger a little bit better and maybe incorporating some physical touch that works for her really well. Um, does that sound correct to you?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So, gonna do a little sort of experiment with you. So just go with me here. Suppose that tonight, while you were asleep, there was a miracle, and this problem that you brought here today disappeared. The miracle occurs while you're sleeping, so you do not immediately know that it's happened. Um, but when you wake up, what's the first thing that you would notice that would let you know that there's been a miracle that happened?
I would definitely say that if I asked her to do something and she does it the first time, that would be miraculous. So, if I were to wake up, come upstairs, she's likely already awake, and I say, "Hey, it's time to eat breakfast," and she says, "Okay," and walks over to the table, I would consider that pretty miraculous.
Yeah. Okay. Um, how, I guess, aside from those obvious things, how would, if you say you're still in bed, you open your eyes, the miracles happen, but you don't realize it, what what would you feel?
Like not knowing the miracle had happened, what would I
Yeah.
feel?
Mm-hmm.
Probably some level of anxiety, some level of, dread might be a strong word, but just knowing that I have to commit a solid 30 minutes of almost badgering her to do things that she needs to do while I'm also getting her dressed, getting breakfast ready, getting her in the car, taking her to school. So I guess in some ways I would almost expect chaos. Um, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So so imagine a scale from 0 to 10, where 10 indicates everything you described in the miracle day is happening now, and 0 indicates that none of that is happening. What number would you say you're at right now?
I would say a 6, and I would say leaning a little bit above a 5 only because as she's gotten older, a lot of the arguing and not listening and stuff doesn't always escalate to a blowout, but it is
Mhm.
always still there. Like that is a baseline with her is never listening, never doing things until I've said them 10 plus times. But yeah, so I'd say 6.
Okay. Um, so if we were to try to get that number to say just a 7, um, what would have to be happening at this higher number that would show that slight improvement?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things I would say. Number one would be less fighting. I
Mhm.
think that's
Okay.
probably an important one is when the blowups do occur, reducing that frequency. Um, I would say the higher that number goes, the more that turns on to her actually doing things without being reminded, without being prodded. But I would say, yeah, to go to a 7, it would be less explosive anger from both
Yeah.
parties.
Okay. I hear that. That would be ideal. Um, okay. So, um, going forward, so we've talked about Charlotte, we've talked about your goals here, which is less anger, how you feel like you could maybe get closer to that goal, which, you know, in an ideal world, that would be a 10, and you're at a 6 right now. So, how would we get to that 7? So, we're going to run some experiments in our before our next session. Um, and I want to sort of come up with that homework or those experiments together. Um, so, my thoughts, and you can obviously say no or yes to this, but my thoughts would be, um, what if between now and our next session, we set an experiment of sitting with Charlotte once a day for 5 minutes, and just either doing whatever she likes. So what kind of like physical touch does she like? What's something that you would feel comfortable in?
Say, hugging or cuddling would
Okay.
probably be a big one.
Okay.
So starting with 5 minutes a day,
Mm-hmm.
trying to have that touch with her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 5 minutes a day, maybe watching TV together and cuddling at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, if that's something you'd be comfortable with, I think that would be a good starting point.
Okay. Yeah, I can certainly do that.
Okay. Um, okay. So I think that's a good starting point for us and from our first session. Um, and then we'll sort of check back in next week and see where we're at after that.
Okay. That
Okay,
sounds good.
perfect. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Bye.